All right, to the aviation sector now. Hong Kong carrier Cathay Pacific has said that profits plunged in 2019 as it reeled from political unrest in Hong Kong, while it warned financial losses lay ahead owing to the spread of the new coronavirus. The flagship carrier was battered throughout the second half of last year as violent pro-democracy protests raged for months in Hong Kong, sparked by widespread public anger at Beijing's rule. Today, the flagship carrier reported an attributable profit of $220 million for last year, a significant drop from what it made in 2018. Joining me in the studio to discuss the impact of the coronavirus outbreak on the aviation sector is Tayo Ojuri, senior partner at Aglow Aviation. You are welcome to the Global Business Report, sir.
It's always a pleasure.
Fantastic, sir. So, I mean, has there been a worse hit sector than aviation when it comes to the coronavirus? Can you please speak on what we've seen so far?
Interestingly, obviously, with coronavirus, we see lots of sectors of it's a human epidemic at the moment. It's actually human, so every sector of life is affected.
Right.
But from the aviation's perspective, you find out that is actually affecting us negatively and impacting us significantly, because what we've seen in the since January is actually you've seen lots of bad cases getting worse in terms of when the epicenter, the South Asia, which was in a bid to actually reduce the spread, because the fastest way of travel or transportation is aviation.
Right.
So they felt to reduce it, they had to stop flights. So there were a lot of reduced frequency to mainland China. And after that, you now realize there was a lot of reduction in capacity. A lot of foreign airlines, European, North American airlines, cut all the flights to South Asia and Southeast Asia. So with that, you find that it's affecting not just aviation, but also all the other parts of the economy, like the manufacturing economy sector. You find out that though aviation cargo belly hold in aviation for last quarter actually reduced. So what we're now seeing is it's actually dipped more in January to February,
right?
Because we found lots of the most of the manufacturing companies were closed, and with the closure, the just-in-time equipment and all just-in-time things that needed to be shipped either to North America or even to Europe and Africa were not available.
Wow, wow. There was a viral video that I think was circulating earlier this morning of a man on an empty flight, I believe heading to or from Paris, doing some warm dance. But the thing that caught the eye was that the flight was empty. Can you help explain why? Because to my mind and to lots of other people, if it was an empty flight, why is the airline still flying? Why is there only one or two people on the flight? And I think they attributed this to corona as well. If you could help explain that.
Yes, with the corona, we find out that it's actually affected the fare factor. Lots of people have cancelled their flights. Lots of companies have reduced the need to. It's on a need to fly basis. So with that, there's been reduction in travel. However, the challenge within the aviation sector is that we have a slot allocation system.
Slot allocation system?
Yes,
okay.
With the slot allocation system, the airline has to travel to the airport. It has a slot that's allocated to it and a time. So they have to leave and operate that slot as designated time.
So regardless of whether...
Yes, which is not good business.
Right.
Obviously, you have to... But what you can do to actually keep that slot is to actually ensure that you reduce your frequency, which is still not good business.
Ah, wow. Okay. Now, what about the business model of aviations? With everything that's happened with the losses, cancellations, is it possible that we are going to see a review of the business model of aviations with regards to the impact that the coronavirus has had? Interestingly,
what we'll see is we've learned from lessons in the past, from 2008 financial downturn. We've learned from SARS, and obviously those are their lesson learned. And Willie Walsh in a podcast last week who is the chairman of AIG, did mention that from this lesson learned, what we need to now do is, obviously, we're going to see is lots of airlines are going
to go down. Sorry, so just hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back and continue on that point. Okay? We'll be right back. Global Business Report on the Rise News. Welcome back to the Global Business Report here on Arise News. We're speaking with Mr. Tayo Ojuri, Managing Partner for Aglow Aviation, talking about the aviation industry and the effect the impact of the coronavirus on the aviation industry. Thank you for sticking with us, sir. So we were just talking about the impact just now. We're talking about, you're explaining the slot system to us, why airlines still have to fly even when they have only 1 or 2 passengers. And right before we went to break, we were talking about whether or not the business model of the aviation sector will possibly have a review after what's been going on with the coronavirus. So please, sir, carry on.
Yes, it would do, because obviously from lesson learned from 2008 financial downturn, from the SARS epidemic, what we'll actually find is we see lots of airlines going under. We saw Flybe go under. Korean management has already announced that they might not survive the coronavirus issue. You have that's in Southeast Asia. South Asia. We actually have Korean Air, like you said. Alitalia is at the brink. Norwegian is struggling. So with that all said, once that happens, after the advent of Corona, what we're going to see is we're going to see a change, a shake in that system, whereby the legacy carriers or the group owners of the airline, of major airlines, will now have either smaller airlines operating those routes to fill the routes that these other airlines used to operate. So what's going to happen, we see new airlines evolve. Wow. But I doubt if that because of the challenges of the shock to the economic system, we don't see that new airlines just evolving all of a sudden. But the time-tested airlines, the legacy airlines that actually have smaller airline groups within them, would actually operate and dominate that system.
Interesting. Let's put a dollar figure to this. For example, for Hollywood, the film industry, the estimates there is that they may lose about $5 billion for fiscal year 2020. So that's Hollywood entertainment. What's the figure that we're hearing for aviation that they could lose for 2020?
Already in January, February, we've actually, in South Asia, with 4.9 million.
So that's Hollywood's entire
Europe
month.
Is losing $770,000 weekly.
Weekly, wow.
Now, to put that in perspective, annually, IATA is estimating $113 billion.
$113 billion
for loss to the airline industry.
Wow.
And we're looking at not just the airline industry, we're looking at ancillary services within that ecosystem.
That is quite an impact. Okay, so now, for us here in Africa, what kind of impact do we see flowing through with what's going on?
Well, I would first look at the overall impact, the macroeconomic impact of the coronavirus on our economy, which is going to affecting oil. Oil is our major source of income.
Right.
With that, it affects disposable income. Disposable income. Aviation, unfortunately, is a function of disposable income. If there's no disposable income, people do not fly or are not driven to fly.
Right.
What we now have, we have alternate means of communication. Technology helps us. So there's only a need to travel basis, which is going to reduce that travel capacity. That's one effect this would have on aviation within Africa or within Nigeria specifically.
Right.
The other part is the cost of operations is dollar. 80% of airline operation is dollarized.
80%?
80%.
That is...
So with your maintenance, even Jet A1 is important.
Right.
Yes, your training and the services, spares, all these have to be with the estimation and forecast of dollar cost increasing, and exchange rate already having a very tight weight. It's tight to get forex now. You now find that that's going to affect the cost of operations for domestic airlines, and that's going to affect their growth within the next 2 or 3 quarters of 2020.
I wanted to get your thoughts on something else. So with these mounting costs, we've already seen some issues in certain African countries, which I hope you can speak to. But I wanted you to speak to the fact that Corona is coming at a bad time. Yes. And that some of these, can you speak to that? Some of these airlines already have some issues even before the virus hit.
The challenge is obviously it's made a bad case worse. We have lots of airline business has very limited tiny margins.
Yes.
So once there's a shock in the system, it affects the airline industry. Like they say, when the economy sneezes, airline industry catches a cold. Right. And it's a very terrible cold as it is. So what we've seen is South African Airways they've been bleeding in the last few years. Kenyan Airways has been under restructure since 2017. And they've actually gone to borrow about $17 million from the states to actually service their aircraft engines. So all this affects the airline business. You've seen lots of ban on travel. Egypt, because of the coronavirus, has been on that list of those passengers that cannot travel to Qatar, even to Saudi. So this is actually going to affect not just aviation, it is going to affect other facets of the economy.
Wow.
And we're seeing Ramadan coming up. Umrah is a very vital part of Ramadan. And you have lots of people that actually travel during Ramadan to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
With the closure and the ban on some travel restrictions on some countries, that's going to actually affect the frequency and the volume of passengers that are using aviation facilities.
Thank you for mentioning it for volume, because I was going to bring up the counterpoint of looking ahead. It's like, okay, can the industry survive? Because people will always fly. I mean, you mentioned Ramadan, Olympics, business events, people will always fly. So can the sector survive this? I mean, looking forward, is that possible? I mean, because there's a lot of doomsday scenarios as to how it will be affected. So, what's your take on that?
People will always fly,
right.
And it's looking at hindsight. We've gone through this before, so it's to take out what lesson learned, and just to it's to reassure people. One, good communication is key. Because once you have good communication on what the challenge is and how to mitigate the coronavirus spread is good to address. That's going to address, Italy has actually, for example, they've clamped down on the movement.
Yes.
But they said restaurants can open from 6 to 6 as long as there's a 3-meter gap between each customer.
Right.
So what it's and airlines actually doing a good job at that, showing infographics of how clean their aircraft and disinfected their aircrafts are, so that to ensure that this is not the platform where you're going to get infected. Because once people are scared that you can get infected within a contained area, they're not going to be afraid to fly. So airlines are doing a lot of communication to customers, lots of emails going out, lots of infographics going out. Over and beyond that, it's stabilizing that system. For other service providers, for them to come over to that country, which will drive aviation.
Now, as far as other opportunities, you've mentioned aviation being like a supporting narrative to other sectors. Yeah, I would like for you to speak to as far as opportunities that we see. Maybe I think you mentioned cargo or Greek or other areas. If those get developed, then I think going forward, then aviation has some outlets to spring up again. Yes.
Well, starting with the government, what government had actually had the master plan. And with that master plan, we had where agriculture is one of the top parts of economic drivers. So once there's a backward integration of standardized products that needs to be exported or moved from place to place, our roads or multimodal means of transportation is still not a challenge. At the moment, the rail is not optimal. The roads has challenges. So we can, even within the domestic sector, within the domestic Nigerian sector, there's need to move goods and services. So over and beyond that, on the regional or international sphere, you actually, once we have the agricultural farm and products developed standardized for export, we're able to leverage on that. And those are one of the, tourism, like you said, is another vibrant opportunity that's able to bring, they're able to drive the foreign exchange and drive the aviation sector.
Fantastic. Now, in your position at Aglow Aviation, you consult, yes? Are you worried with regards to African airlines? I just want to follow up on that. About their viability going forward. You've mentioned Kenya Airlines having to raise money, where South Africa is. Are they in any danger of, I've tied this back to an earlier answer you gave about the business model, where some airlines will go down and then bigger ones will take over? African Airlines, are they in any way vulnerable to being, falling at wayside, and then maybe European airlines taking over their routes or anything? Is there any threat of that looking ahead?
Every airline is vulnerable, and every business is vulnerable. But what are the strategies that are put in place to ensure growth and being able to withstand the shock? One of the strategies that they've learned over time is the fact that you need cooperation and alliances. One you have, from Africa's perspective, once you have technical partnership, you're able to ensure inflow of low interest funds, which is higher than what it is here. And technical expertise is able to actually help grow the company here. Those strategic alliances helps the routes that you're not operating. Those that are within your alliance can operate the routes, so that way you're able to leverage on your operations. Fantastic.
Well, we've got about a couple minutes left. I just want to get your thoughts still on the aviation sector, but for Nigeria specifically now. The issue of ticketing. Now, I understand for domestic operators in the space, I read an article a while back that they're saying ticketing possibly has to go up for them to survive. Just about 50 seconds, if you can, just to address the ticketing.
Yes, the cost of operations is really high, but when you look at the most viable route, which is Lagos Abuja, is about $84. With $84, you're actually barely making profit. So yes, it needs to go high, but how many people, back to disposable income, how many people can afford that if it goes higher, able to fly on that route?
Thank you so much for your thoughts. A robust sector. We've been speaking with Mr. Tayo Ojuri, Managing Partner for Aglow Aviation. Thanks for your thoughts on the aviation sector.